Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, they want to go for their ego defense mechanism. They want to drive a country into war. Not just at a political level, not just at a country level, but even if you're looking at leaders, you always see that there are some psychological traits which are dominant in these people. In India, we see like 24% of the child sexual abusers are from the trusted person. There is only one slice of bread to eat. Should I be eating it or should I give it to the child? But when we are talking about these people, when that whole disturbance happens inside my brain switches into that impulsive mode. Once I go into that impulsive mode, I realize that many of the corporate leaders or political leaders or people who are in prominent positions, they have the psychopathic traits. Is there any psychological or psychiatric angle to this? A lot of researchers talk about how in the general population it is 1% of people who have psychopathic traits, and when it comes to people like CEOs, welcome to the HonestHour, Dr. Virinchi Sharma ji. Thank you so much for the invitation, Andy. It's a pleasure to have you on board. Thank you. Doctor, recently in the news we are seeing a lot of warlike situations, like where Israel and United States of America attack Iran. Then we've seen Ukraine and Russian crisis, the Syrian crisis, and very recently the crisis or the warlike situation almost escalating into a warlike situation between India and Pakistan. Now, people talk about strategy, political developments, etc. Let's put aside politics and religion. Now, when we talk about individual human beings, in the situation of war, majority of the people are not participants of it, right? So what is this phenomena, psychological phenomena, where you must have not met those people, not seen them, but per se, in this situation, you're expecting them to be attacked? I think the whole concept starts with the dehumanization that our brain already does about the other individuals. Right. Now, when it comes to a particular country that our country is fighting with, I think we are already being fed about how brutal they have been, how inhuman their behaviors have been, which bring about a sense of enmity within us, and that enmity has already been probably hiding inside us, which is waiting for a time like this to come out. Okay. So that's one thing that usually is a reason why, despite not knowing whom we are fighting, despite not knowing are they actually, is everybody on the other side as bad as what we are thinking, we make that division in our head. And if you go back into the ancient times also, right, I think taking one side was important. Dividing instead of being neutral, it was very important that you take one side, because being in a group always gave you more security. When centuries back, when livelihood was more living in the forests or in the jungles, you couldn't be an independent party saying that, okay, I don't see anything wrong here. I don't see anything wrong on both the sides. You can't say that. You need to be choosing one side. And even if you go back into the previous yugas, where we talk about wars that have happened, people had to choose one side. Even if you take about the Kurukshetra war, right, people had to choose either if they wanted to be with the Pandavas or with the Kauravas. And now once a choice is made, there is this whole brain choosing one side, and because it is chosen one side, it starts liking the aspects of that one side and automatically starts seeing the negatives of the other side. So this has been something that has come for very long time, and at the same time you also try to build a sense of love or for your own country, for your own land. Right. Because we believe that this is the place that we are born, this is the place that has been taking care of us, so we need to be protecting this place. And right now when it comes to the aspect of protection, we are not looking at if we are wrong or if we are right, but we also want to make sure that we protect it at any cost. So now that kind of a phenomenon is also something that helps us go towards choosing one side. So if you look into the psychology of war, undoubtedly choosing a side has always been more protective. And at the same time, survival was better when you chose a side instead of staying alone. So, even if you are looking at a simple conversation between two people, if there is a discussion, a heated discussion or a debate,
Right.
people get more importance when you choose a side. So, if I'm wanting to say something, I need to come to one side and say, because at least I know that this side of the people are going to give me priority or going to accept what I say.
Makes sense.
So that is something that has come over years, and this is one phenomenon which helps us protect our own identity, helps us protect our own psychological safety, and that is one reason why we tend to start looking at the negatives of the other person and start believing that what we are doing is actually right.
But coming to this dilemma during the Kurukshetra war, Arjuna was constantly discussing or seeking opinion from Lord Krishna. Like what is the action that he needs to take? Right? Like choosing a side was highly difficult for him. Right? In that scenario, what is the way ahead?
Well, if you look into the Kurukshetra war, if you look into the scenario that you're talking about, I think when we talk about the conversation happening between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, there, some of the shlokas clearly explain how Arjuna, being one of the greatest warriors, was still very panicky because very clearly the shlokas explain how his hands were trembling, how he was sweating, how he was feeling a little dizzy, how his throat and the mouth were dried up, how he had his heart racing. Yes. So these were all typical symptoms that Arjuna was facing through, which today we look into, when we look into our psychiatric textbooks, this qualifies for a typical anxiety disorder.
Okay.
Now, why did a great warrior like Arjuna have anxiety? It's not because he lacked some skill, but this was purely coming from an entity about, what am I doing? I mean, is it the right thing that I'm doing? They are my brothers too. If I'm going to kill them, that's going to be the end of their lenience, family lenience, that generation, is this right? So these were multiple questions that were coming into Arjuna's mind, which brought in this sense of anxiety. And if you look at, the conversation, what Lord Krishna told him, which brought back the confidence in him to go forward, he did not say that they are bad people, or he did not say that you need to be doing this. All he said was, I want you to follow your dharma. So now when we are talking about dharma, what is that, right thing that you're supposed to be doing here? You are a warrior, your kingdom is at war, and you are supposed to be protecting your kingdom at this point. Okay. And at the same time, I want you to look at the bigger picture. You are doing this not because you want to take revenge or not because you enjoy killing somebody, but you're doing it for a bigger good. So now when we usually look into bringing this into our practical lives, when we have a core value of doing something, none of these thoughts or none of these emotions really disturb you. I always, try to give this example to my patients. If you are wanting to exercise,
right,
your core value should be, I want to be healthy. Now, if my core value is not about health or about some little goal like losing weight or gaining weight. Right. So I start working out today, I want to lose weight. 3 weeks later, I suddenly check my weight and I've put on weight. Now that's going to demoralize me. Instead, if my core value is something much bigger, which is health, this weight gain or weight loss is not really something that is going to impact me. So that way, Arjuna was asked not to look at what is the immediate gain, what is that is going to make you happy in the immediate scenario, but try to look at the bigger picture here. You, as a warrior, as a protector of your kingdom, need to step in right now because your kingdom is in problem. And they could be anybody. They could be more powerful than you. They could be your own kith and kin. But at this point, you need to be only focusing on dharma. And that is what, brought back Arjuna into getting into the war. And we all know what the result was.
And another thing, sir, like when we talk about India and Pakistan partition, the 1947 partition there was a lot of bloodbath, lot of situations where a lot of families suffered on both sides, right? Now, there could be people who have not practically lived at that point of time, today's generation. Now, the larger question is this intergenerational trauma. Though we have not experienced those situations, still that impact of partition still exists. So is this for real, sir, the intergenerational trauma? Like, let's say my great-grandfather or, somebody related to me has suffered. So I also carry the same hatred, same trauma until this date?
Well, it is quite possible, because now when there is a brain in the family that has suffered, that has been traumatized, but did not get a chance to heal.
Right.
Now that brain could be carrying this trauma not just with themselves in their lifetime, but could also be bringing it into the next generation.
Sure.
Because it is very easy sometimes to talk about peace. It is very easy to sometimes talk about brotherlyhood feelings, but
fraternity, brotherlyhood,
absolutely,
peace.
Absolutely. These aspects are very nice to be brought in a discussion, probably like this. But now, when somebody has undergone a trauma and there was no justification for that trauma, why did that person had to suffer? For no reason. He was innocent or she was innocent, but that person had to undergo all of this. And in such scenarios, the brain's threat system or the fear system activates. And when there is an activation like this threat system is always going to carry fear in the kith and kin. I would be afraid about my friendships with my children. I would be afraid about the places that they want to travel. I would be afraid about the decisions that they make. So this fear is something that is going to carry forward in generations. And unless they actually sit with it, process it, make peace with it, you cannot expect it to suddenly disappear because today things are getting better. So a lot of times when people talk about why not artists come from there,
right.
Why not we go there and play a cricket match. I think this is where the whole confusion comes from, because today you want to make things right, but things in the past have not been finished yet. They've not been processed yet in the right way. And without doing that, you cannot expect a brain to all of a sudden change, because there are structural and chemical changes that happen inside the brain tissue, which brings about a bigger change in the way the individual sees situations, in the way that individual processes his emotions, in the way he thinks, in the way he behaves. So there's a huge difference when you talk about a brain where a threat system has not been activated and the one that has been activated. So now once the threat system is activated, that person cannot see a scenario just like how you and me are seeing. So let's imagine both of us are walking on the same road, but I have already had an experience of seeing a snake on that road. You could be very casual walking in that road, but my brain is constantly telling me that there is threat.
There is a phobia?
Absolutely. So there is that constant fear that my brain is walking in with, and that fear is not going to let me take decisions as easy as what you are taking.
So it's though it might not be a lived experience, intergenerational trauma has some scientific and clinical backing to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Recently, Psychology Today has published a report stating that leaders like Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, etc., people who are usually aggressive and who want to go for a war, that's what they called as war mongering. So they have stated that this is a kind of psychological trait where, because they want to go for their ego defense mechanism, they want to drive a country into war. Is that true, sir?
Well, it is quite possible, because now when you look at leaders, not just at a political level, not just at a country level, but even if you're looking at leaders at a work level, people running organizations, you always see that there are some psychological traits which are dominant in these people. And now these traits don't let the individual look at things at an empathetic level, but they are looking at it at a more superficial level where power, superiority play a more important role than emotions. Positive emotions like empathy, kindness. So undoubtedly leaders have these kind of traits, and when these kind of traits are dominant, you see them as more aggressive leaders. I think for the longest time people wanted leaders like that, but now I think times are changing where you want someone who is protecting the country, not just taking the country to war. Now if you look at the current scenario, sometime back we were discussing, our leader of India right now is having the best ties with all these countries that you are talking about, but we are not yet into war.
Yeah, Iran, we have very good relations. United States of America, we have good relations. Israel, we have good relations.
Even the UAE,
we always support the cause. Now, in this scenario, what should be done? Please.
So I think the ability of pushing ourselves away from war for this long itself talks about some positive psychological traits that our leader and the people who are with him, because we all know that a leader functions well when he has the best of the team members, the bureaucrats or the rest of the team members who are advising him. So that advisory board should be able to think at a larger picture here. Currently, we are not under any threat. Nobody has, challenged us to a level where we need to really step forward. And even if you look into the last 2-3 decades, I think every time there was some scenario like this only when there was some harm done to our people. So it was more of protecting our rights, but we've not aggressively stepped in. Because we all know the geopolitical concepts of why they want to take forward this war, about how, winning this war is going to help them in many scenarios. But right now, I think all of us sitting in this country are actually feeling very safe because somebody sitting there is thinking in a more empathetic tone than a more aggressive tone.
Is it something to deal with India's civilizational and cultural ethos, or the way of life that we have carried on through generations?
Absolutely, undoubtedly, because I think for the greatest time, we have believed in respecting others. It's not just respecting individuals, but respecting objects, respecting the elements of the nature. So I think the way we all have been ingrained in our brains itself is where we are happy, satisfied, we know what has to be done, we are sitting in a comfortable chair right now. And I think that kind of a nature itself, which is there in our ecosystem, like you said, which has been ingrained in us coming through generations, does impact the way you think. And such brains are cognitively stronger, and that is another reason why a lot of our population are, leading, many organizations all around the world. So when we talk about the brain, the emotions are more primitive, coming from more primitive areas of the brain, like the limbic system, the amygdala. These are all primitive areas. So what is a human brain? Human brain is superior to all the other living beings because it has one area which is more developed than any other brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. So the front part of the brain is the prefrontal cortex. Now, when your prefrontal is stronger, you think, you're able to focus, you're able to be attentive, you use your memory well, your ability to solve problems is better, your ability to think analytically, rationally, use your intelligence, take the right call, judgments. So all these abilities are, great human abilities, but unfortunately, most of us are not working on this cognitive mode. We are working on this more emotional mode, which is impulsive, aggressive, getting some
gratification.
Yeah, that gratification in hurting others, in, showing more superiority on others. So these kinds of things probably are lesser in civilizations which are, working on humanity, empathy, and we are blessed to be one of those civilizations.
As rightly said, as you've quoted, so it is also to deal with our India's strong cultural values.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the idea of India per se, Indianness per se, or Bharat per se.
True.
But sir, the other side of it is like when we talk about leaders like Trump and some aggressive leaders, the journal also reported, stating that these are some kind of narcissistic patterns.
Correct.
And people use military as a defense mechanism for the distorted ego.
So very true. So because now when we are talking about narcissism, we are talking about individuals where there is a lot of grandiosity in their thinking. They believe that they have the most advanced knowledge about things.
Right.
They believe that they are very superior in their ability to deal with situations. And at the same time, in narcissists, empathetic nature is much, much low. Thinking about what the other person feels, thinking about how the other person reacts, thinking about am I doing any harm to the other person is very, very little. So if you look at leadership roles, sometimes these kind of traits are helpful. But somewhere when an individual does not know where the line is being drawn, when the individual does not have a mental health professional guiding them about using the traits in the right way, they gradually start exploding in a negative way. Because currently, even the countries which are very developed and are currently involving in war, it's not that, people there are sitting safe.
Yeah.
So it is one person's thought process or one team's thought process which is putting millions and billions of people at risk.
Yes.
So that surely
security risks also. People
Correct.
just can't, the very apprehensive, very pessimistic,
Right.
the populace, they're, always under threat.
true.
Imagine the people in Israel, for that matter,
Correct.
or in United States of America also, they get very apprehensive if somebody just comes and knocks their door also.
Correct.
That's not the case in India per se.
True. And, constantly living in a fear, again, weakens the brain, where your threat system is constantly active. Your other brain areas are not getting enough blood circulation. So all of them gradually start weakening the brain. They change the individual's personality. And that way, one narcissist leader, family member can, destroy a lot many people, associated with them.
Imagine a 21-year-old soldier from Punjab. He's joined the army recently, and he's been posted in Siachen Glacier or LOC. Now he sees things that human mind earlier has never processed,
Correct.
has never seen. Now he comes back home. He's having sleepless nights. Now he's unable to socialize properly with the people. He hears sounds. Now nobody talks about this. Usually this guy was like any other youngster. And he's been exposed to certain circumstances, which are warlike circumstances or, difficult circumstances. Now, how do they process this? How does the human mind process this kind of turbulence?
Well, PTSD is one of the commonest psychological conditions
What is this, sir? PTSD?
So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
And this is one of the commonest conditions that we usually see in individuals who are working in the army, military, or who have exposed themselves to war.
Right.
So it's not just in these people, but even in
police.
Correct.
For that matter, even doctors might also see.
Yes. So even common men, when they have exposed themselves to extreme stressful situations like a car accident or witnessing a murder in front of them.
Yes.
So in such situations, the changes that happen inside the brain are so severe that these episodes continue to haunt the brain even after many weeks or many months.
Okay.
So the commonest symptoms that we usually see in them is avoidance. So for example, if somebody has witnessed a car accident, there is extreme avoidance to even sitting in a car or even watching a car sometimes traveling on the road.
Achha.
So that kind of an impact is what a PTSD brain can be having. So they are constantly having images of whatever they have seen, and these images can sometimes awaken them from the sleep. We call it as a startle reflex, where they get up with a lot of fear all of a sudden in the middle of the night, because the brain is constantly playing that image even during sleep. And once they get up from the sleep, we see them having terrible anxiety symptoms like extreme palpitations, heart rate touching up to 150, 160, 170, shortness of breath, and most of them feel that I could be having a cardiac arrest right now. So these kinds of avoidance and having repetitive images and thoughts about whatever they have seen is something that we commonly see in people who have been in the army. And undoubtedly,
it also goes for years together.
Oh yes, if it is untreated, it can go up to years, and it gradually starts eating away that person's confidence, eating away that person's abilities also. So undoubtedly, psychological help when someone has undergone a situation like this is something that is important, and as early as possible is also something that we need to be working on, because while the brain is under stress, there is a lot of disruption happening to many neurons inside the brain. And this kind of a disruption sometimes can be an irreversible change also. So before things go to that extent, if you are able to identify, start processing them, start helping the individual to come out of this through therapeutic techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy, which have been very effective in helping individuals come out of such situations.
Right. Moving on, doctor, recently, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, he's been, attacked or killed by the US and Israel's forces, right? Now, the larger narrative which is built is about martyrdom, right? Now, he said that I'm ready to die for my country. Now, putting that issue aside, we see radicalization. Radicalization amongst especially youth, whether it could be based on ideology, whether it could be based on religion, or whether it could be based on any kind of identity. We've seen in Indian context, the radicalization based on religion amongst Muslims, amongst Hindus, amongst Sikhs per se, the Khalistan movement, or whatever. We still see that. Now, in this radicalization, what happens, people are believing that when we fight for our ideology, for that matter, even terrorists per se, when we fight for a particular cause and we give our own life as a martyr, right, for the cause. So what is this mindset that is driving these people to take such extreme step?
I think one thing that we usually see in most of these groups or individuals is the brainwashing starts at a very young age. Now, why is that an important entity in this is because at a younger age, when the person has just hit his adolescence, there is more emotions and hormonal influence than your prefrontal cortex putting up logic and rational thinking. So your prefrontal is developing till 22, and by the time the prefrontal is developed, this brain has been so well trained about these belief systems. So after a while of practicing something, the brain switches into an automatic thought or an automatic behavior. So let's take a simple example. If I'm asked to demonstrate to some young kids, kids of age 4 years and 5 years, about healthy brushing habits. If I'm asked to demonstrate that, the first thing I would be doing is take a toothbrush, put a toothpaste, and start demonstrating how I brush.
Yes.
Now, these are kids who don't know what brushing is. Why am I only teaching them right hand? I could have also taught them left hand, but this is something automatically my brain does. So there is no thinking here. I do it.
It's more like conditioning?
Absolutely. So now when these brains are conditioned about some aspects about ideology or religion or, God, by the time they come to an age where thinking is possible, the brain still does not choose thinking. So that's why a lot of brainwashing starts at a very young age. And these people, by the time they, reach their early 20s, are well prepared with that whole ideology, and probably talking logic to them does not make sense because
they're completely indoctrinated.
Yes. So they're well they're well versed with knowledge, but the acceptance of that for their brain is something that is very difficult, and that leads into a larger destruction.
Yeah, so usually people say it is only the people who are illiterate, people who are downtrodden, people who are vulnerable or of poverty, they get into this. But we see practically, or according to the media reports also, people who are scientists, people who are doctors, people who are very well educated, they also get into this.
Absolutely.
Now, sir, like as you said, it is a conditioning, number one. And some people might get into it because of psychological pain, that they want some identity or some meaning to life. Is that also the case in this?
Absolutely possible. So what we usually see is, most of the times when we meet individuals with such mindsets, we see that their childhood has impacted their brain a lot. So growing up in situations where they've seen difficulties, it can be parental conflicts, interpersonal relationship issues between family members, alcoholic parent, or when they've seen unfortunate situations in the families also, where the father beats the mother, or the mother has some extramarital affair. When they've witnessed all of this, their brain sensitizes pain. So for them, beating somebody is not very harsh, or for them abusing somebody or harming somebody for proving something is not very harsh. A lot of times these individuals are also lonely from within because they've not got the right kind of love from their family members. So now they start looking for this from the external, and when some leader of these radical groups gives them even some hope, they start immediately idolizing that person. And at the same time, we also...
Is it also like a venting mechanism?
Oh yes, because they've have a lot of insecurities inside.
Deep
and
insecurities.
Now, oh yes. And these insecurities are usually fulfilled by these groups, where people start appreciating them for those little efforts that they put. They give them some titles, and all of them builds that sense of security inside them, which suddenly the whole ideology that they're working for becomes the purpose of their life, because they've never had anything else that they've seen it in that entity. Now this becomes the whole purpose, and that is where people are at a later age, even when the family gets to know, try to bring them back. We see that these people are so well attached to their new leader and their new ideology right now.
So it is something much deeper than what is visible.
Undoubtedly.
So there's deeper trauma and deeper conditioning and deeper patterns that have developed over a period of time that is being manifested into this.
Absolutely.
Another significant phenomena that we see, many a times, even my friends and relatives, when we discuss, there's this one dimension where ordinary citizens who are pretty peaceful in normal circumstances, but when they see a warlike situation, let's say in Indian context only, let us say about Operation Sindoor or Balakot strikes or Kargil war, etc. Now these people suddenly become bloodthirsty. Some people become suddenly hyperactive or hyper aggressive. Until then, there are people who never, even if they get into little quarrels, they always go for, the avoidance or, the peaceful kind of mindset. Now, what happens in this situations that, a person suddenly transforms into this kind of bloodthirsty or warmongering personality?
It is undoubtedly that their sense of security inside their brain gets disturbed when they hear about a scenario like this. Because when I hear about a warlike situation, undoubtedly, it is true that I am worrying about my life first before I'm actually thinking about the Jawans who are fighting for us, or before I think about the country.
Right.
That's a human tendency. So when that whole disturbance happens inside my brain switches into that impulsive mode. So once I go into that impulsive mode, I realize that currently my security can come back only when there is an end to this. And my brain at that point does not think about peace as an end, because peace takes a longer time. But firing at someone, beating somebody is, more quicker. So it is here the impulsive nature of the brain which is working faster because of the whole uncertainty which is triggering the primitive brain areas to again get activated.
Makes sense.
And the whole process of thinking logically about why not we look at any other way of dealing this goes and takes the back seat. And on the other hand, the whole hatred that we've been told or that we've been fed into our brains about the other person,
Right.
which for many years we've been probably inside our head trying to logically fight with and say, okay, maybe they are also good people, they could also be having some good qualities. Now all of that goes to one corner and the whole hatred comes forward that these people are bad people. So once that labeling happens, we believe that bad has to end. There has to be an end to these negative mindsets. So that is where we want, the war to finish in a way where, we are victorious and we want the destruction of the other side.
Quite interesting, Doc. And, another phenomena over here is like these days we are living in very difficult circumstances, right? We see a lot of unrest, civil strife, and also in the global context, we see a lot of warlike situations, situations where countries are fighting with each other, situations where there's a lot of political as well as economic uncertainties. It's not just political, it is also military and economic uncertainty that we see. Now, there are these youngsters, right, or young chaps who are exposed to these on YouTube videos, on television channels, where they see people being attacked, people being killed, and somebody justifying the killings, and also young children being killed, buildings in rubbles, right, drones attacking, missiles flowing from two sides. Now when a young mind, which is impressionable, watches this violence which they have never been exposed to, how does it condition it?
It's unfortunate that, a lot of young brains are exposed to such kind of a content because undoubtedly it shatters the whole confidence that brain has been building. Because the confidence comes from the environment, confidence comes from people, not just from the self. But now once all of them start shattering, the brain goes into a state of confusion, fear, and what usually happens in uncertainty is your brain starts creating some narrations. So now there is a scenario, there is a warlike scenario, there is an emotion, that is, I'm afraid. But between both of them, there is a whole narration that your brain starts creating. The brain starts creating narrations like, today could be your last day. What if the missile falls on your house? What if your loved ones are killed in this? What if you are killed and, there is nobody to take care of your wife and your children? And this kind of a narration that the brain starts producing is the one that starts destroying or damaging the brain. So gradually, this kind of a thought process starts causing a lot of dysfunction in the neuronal circuits that are formed. And there is a greater chance of these people developing conditions like depressions, anxieties, insomnias, and like we were talking about PTSD, like, getting exposed to some trauma and not being able to come out of that. And this is what we usually see in such scenarios. So undoubtedly, psychological help is something that people should be accessing during such difficult times, because the brain is not in our control. The thoughts are not in our control, and the thoughts can vary from slightest, disruption to a large level of negative thoughts. So to stop something like this, one, psychological help, and practices like meditation, mindfulness, which helps us be in the present, not go into the past, not go into the future, but stay in the present, is something that can help.
That certainly gives some awareness to a lot of parents and young chaps around. Like, Doctor, another important aspect in all this that we have discussed until now is this idea called revenge, right? Now, recently, a research from Oxford University, they've stated that revenge is one of the best addictions. It gives that stimulation to the mind, like, they have drawn an analogy with heroin. That kind of nervous stimulation is given. Now, what is this phenomenon of revenge? How does the mind process it? And in this whole scenario of revenge, before the person is actually affected, why does the mind feel gratified? With only the idea that with my action, they might get affected, they might get harmed. In this scenario, only people live years together.
So, it's very true that the aspect of revenge can be compared to an addiction. Now, let's try to take an example of gambling. Gambling is an addictive behavior. Every time I gamble, my brain believes that there is a possibility that I might win. And that little possibility gives me so much of dopamine and gives me so much of encouragement that I continue doing it even after failing 10 or 100 times. So that's very similar to what a revengeful thought does to the brain. So the whole idea about taking revenge itself gives me a dopamine because for the brain, doing something and almost doing something gives the same dopaminergic rush. So winning or almost winning gives the same dopaminergic rush. That's the reason when I compare it with gambling, if I just miss something, my brain does not see it as a failure, but sees it as something very close to winning.
So it generates more hope.
Yes. And that hope is something that, people continue living with this revengeful ideas. So undoubtedly, when it comes to the concept of revenge, why the brain enjoys that is, the brain continues to live in a thought process that I have been cheated, I have been betrayed, and I will be peaceful only when the same thing happens to the other person.
Right.
So I will be happier only when I see the other person suffering. So this is where the whole thought process starts from, that now my happiness is not in my hands, but it is in the hands of, or it is in the situation where others are in distress. So when that whole switch happens, that is when, we start believing in revenge is the only way. And we start thinking that unless I take revenge, I will not be happy. And unfortunately, a lot of these brains continue staying in that distress despite having many opportunities to enjoy the current life. So the fact is, happiness is something that comes from within and it cannot come from anything outside. That's the reason a lot of times we see that after taking the revenge, the individual many a times is not happy.
Yeah, I was just coming to it. Why does this happen? If it produces neurological reward,
Right.
many a times after the revenge, they're not satiated.
Correct.
They feel even more restless after that.
True.
Why does this happen?
So the fact is that when there is...
This was the moment that they were vying for, trying to enjoy this moment, but that doesn't happen.
So while there is an expectation, when your brain is anticipating something, there is a constant dopamine that is being released. But once the act is done, the brain is not producing the dopamine anymore because you already achieved it. And that is where the whole feeling of emptiness comes into the brain. Now, once you have taken the revenge, your brain now switches gradually from the impulsive mode into the more cognitive mode. And this is where your brain starts thinking about, what did I even do? And this is exactly what we also see in the Kurukshetra war.
Okay.
Where after the war, there is that sudden silence in all the Pandavas because they realize that, everything on the other side has been destroyed now.
Even the most aggressive of the Pandavas felt the same situation.
Correct. So somewhere that whole emptiness that sets in, the whole thinking that sets in, or thinking that now begins is something that causes a lot of these negative emotions at that point. So this is something that we also see in other real life scenarios also. We see this in alcoholics who anticipate drinking, who are very excited, but when they are drinking they are not very happy. So that anticipation gives them a lot of excitement, but once they go to that place, once they are sitting with friends, they're not really enjoying with that drinks. We also see it in students where while they are preparing, while they are anticipating the results, there's a lot of excitement, but once the results are out, there is a sudden silence. So
recently also, doctor, like IIT JEE results were announced. The parents around them were hyper excited, the relatives were excited. But this video went viral where the kids who actually cracked the examination, who put so much of effort to clear it, they were behaving in a very socially anxious manner or socially uncomfortable manner. So I think what you mentioned just now is a correlation to that.
It's something very similar. See, when we talk about current competitive examinations and the kind of push that students are given into preparing for these examinations, these students are like those horses that are running a race, which are blinded, which don't know why they are running, which don't know, who don't know where we are heading towards. They only know that we are supposed to run. And now, once your result is out, you don't need to run anymore. And now you don't know where we are heading towards. Unfortunately, not having your other brain areas equally activated other than your exam related areas is one important reason for a phenomenon like this, because there's only one thing that you've been looking forward for, and once you achieve it, you don't know what next. So that is the unfortunate scenario that our students today are in. That is one reason why also having parallel activations of the brain area with other goals or other dimensions of health like fitness, psychological health, social health, these are going to help us deal with such scenarios. Otherwise, there is a sudden crisis like a situation in the brain about what am I going to do now? I was supposed to be doing this, I'm done, and now I don't know what next.
That makes me remind of another instance of Virat Kohli, the cricketer. Now he documented the instances of disrespect that he faced. And then he says that he used them as a performance fuel. In our institute also, AKS IAS Academy, there's several students. Now, when I ask them what is the reason for you to choose civil services, there are some peculiar reasons also. Like somebody has been ragged in their college, right? Now they feel that if I become an IPS officer, then I can take revenge on my senior. Or, there could be some long-term trauma they have experienced with a particular person, or even in their family for that matter, there could be some traumatic situations. What they feel is once they get into the public service, they can use this as a mechanism or a process to get their revenge sorted. Now, is this fuel of revenge? It is sometimes positive, like in the case of Virat Kohli. It can also be sometimes negative. So, till what extent is this justified?
So now when there is a stressful situation in somebody's life, it undoubtedly helps some people to grow from there.
Right.
Now, while we are growing from it, because now all the scenarios that we are talking about are people who did not shatter, but took a step forward to work towards some positivity. Now, when we are working towards positivity, if your goal is a bigger goal, if it has more value to it, then the happiness of doing it is sustained. So, suppose if I have been bullied in my childhood and I want to grow up, become an IPS officer to punish only these people, I could work very hard, I could become an IPS officer, I could punish these people, but after that, there is a whole lot of emptiness that my brain is going to go into. Instead, if my ideology is to work towards many such scenarios that happen, it could be fighting for ragging in all the institutes that are in my control, That's a bigger goal.
Right.
And that has more purpose in it. And when there is more purpose in it, the motivation to do something every single day is going to be bigger and better. Because a lot of times after achievement, we do not really need the same kind of a routine that we are having. So a lot of people could get laid back there.
Right.
So probably when I was working in a government institute as a compulsory part of my residency, I had a routine. I needed to report at one particular time. I needed to come out at one particular time. But now, when I have my own practice, I have a choice about when I want to wake up and when I want to work. So, when there is a bigger purpose, that discipline that I learned can continue. But if that purpose is lost and if it is a very small goal that I had kept, things will not continue the same way. So undoubtedly, changing this kind of a mindset is going to help us rather than, the people whom we want to seek revenge on.
That's quite interesting, doctor. So you mean that the revenge, the purpose of motivation, sometimes there's a term called positive revenge motivation.
Right.
For positive revenge motivation, when you have a larger goal, larger purpose, the fuel will sustain.
Yes.
But if it is for a short term or a parochial goal or a very minimalistic goal or, very pessimistic kind of goal, that fuel that is only very short-lived.
Absolutely.
Right. That's quite some interesting, information that we got from you. And when we talk about revenge, we see something called intimate relationship revenge. Recently, this one case that shook the conscience of the whole nation is the Atul Subhash case. Right. It was a matrimonial dispute where these two individuals were together, they shared a bond, and later it manifested into a revenge. So why does this happen? Like in a lot of divorce cases also we see, and a lot of personal relations also, not only divorce, between siblings, between kith and kin we see. Now these people were together, sometimes they also grew up together. Now when we talk about marriages, they share a bond, they share a relationship, both emotional and physical. Why does this revenge mechanism drop in where the same person whom you had a good affinity till a few days back, a few months back, now you want to harm them?
So the fact is, a lot of times these elements in an individual were always present. But unfortunately, in the initial times of the relationship, during love, there is a sense of feeling that everything that the other person is showing is towards me is love. So for example, this person who behaves this way in the relationship could have always been possessive, but we have been taking it as love. Could have always had jealousy, but could have been taken as love. So somewhere these entities of possessiveness, jealousy are traits that are present in individuals. Sometimes they could be masked by the whole concept of love which is there in the initial terms. But at the same time, over years in the relationship, there have been times where individuals or partners start believing in this whole entitlement, where they believe that I have this right, I can behave this way. So we see disturbances happening at a very early age, but sometimes because of cultural aspects, sometimes because of scenarios like where, let's take a love marriage. They've come out of the marriage. They've come out of their houses to get married, and they can't go back to their homes. So they start living in, with these unhealthy patterns in their partner. And every time there is an unhealthy pattern from the partner and the other partner accepts it, you are fueling this behavior. You are giving a lot more encouragement for the brain to behave like this again. Because this brain learns that this behavior has helped me conquer something in this relationship. So gradually this keeps building up, and at one point when it turns into that absolute violence, that is when things come out in the form of these news articles. But personalities, personality traits, and feelings of entitlement are aspects which have always been there, and it is our duty to actually be able to identify them in our partners before things go out of our hands.
So this is something to deal with the conditioning and their pattern of thinking. It's a behavioral pattern which they didn't express it all this while, because there were a lot of circumstantial factors that were preventing it. Now that they get a circumstance, they react and they want to avenge it.
So absolutely, because I remember once meeting a child who had come to me with some trauma that she has faced, and while talking about her trauma, she spoke about her childhood where her mother was brutally murdered by her father because he saw her intimate with another man. Undoubtedly, what he saw triggered his emotion and he behaved in that particular way. But if you go a little more back into the history, she did tell me that before this incident coming from her father, she has constantly seen the father physically abusing the mother every time she was wrong. And when I say wrong, I'm talking about probably adding a little more salt into the food, or not making sure that his clothes were ironed or pressed, or not helping him by giving him a towel when he went for a shower. So these were smaller things that were gradually building up, where every time the person felt that he was not prioritized, he would start behaving aggressive with his wife, and this aggression grew up to a level in his brain. Gradually, every time he started being aggressive and the wife started accepting it, his brain started feeling that, yes, she is my wife and I have a right to beat her every time she's wrong. And when this sudden scenario happened where she was caught intimate with another man, that person couldn't control his anger, and he within minutes took something that is sharp and chopped her. And this was something very terrible that this girl child had to undergo, which later led into she developing many personality changes.
Like what kind of personality changes were on this girl?
So unfortunately, what happened with this girl was, after this particular incident, her dad married another woman.
Okay.
And now her stepmom was again aggressive with this girl. So there was a double trauma to her. One, she grew up seeing the father beating the mother. Two, she also saw the mother being intimate with other men. Three, when the father got to know about this intimacy, he killed her in front of her. And then the father brought another wife into home, saying that she is your stepmom, and that stepmom continued physically abusing this girl till the age of 18 and 20. And she had multiple personality traits. She had traits of dependency. She had traits of borderline personality, where regulating her emotions were so difficult. Every time there was a stressful situation, her brain would push her into harming herself. So there was deliberate self-harm in her. And all of this gradually pushed her into a severe depressive episode with suicidal thoughts, which was, the major reason why she had approached us.
Now, talking about revenge, there's a opposite side of it is about forgiveness, right? Indian cultural values or the kind of conditioning that we had is about forgiveness. People say forgiveness is a virtue. Now, how do we look at this thing? Now, when a person forgives an evildoer, or according to them, they have harmed them, right? Does that cycle break once you forgive? Or you still carry that trauma?
It's not always easy to immediately end it. It can be something verbal that you say that I forgive you, but your brain has already developed some patterns inside in regards to the other person.
Right.
The good part about the human brain is you can rewire it as many number of times that you want. But now that rewiring should happen over time with continuous positive behaviors coming from the other side. So unless that happens, the whole aspect of one individual telling the other that I forgive you, okay, I will try and forget everything, is only going to remain as words, because the impressions that it has made inside the brain are strong enough, and these impressions can continue to impact us even after many years, if not processed in the right way, and if not given the right opportunity to heal from it or rewire it in the best possible way.
So forgiveness should be complemented with reconciling.
Absolutely.
Internally.
Absolutely.
Then only that it can actually have a long-lasting impact.
Yes.
Or else you still are in that loop.
Oh, yes.
Doctor, I was just going through a report, okay, which is saying that usually many of the people in positions of power, or many of the corporate leaders or political leaders or people who are in prominent positions, they have some kind of passive aggression. And they are also, sometimes more harmful than a serial killer. They have the psychopathic traits. Is there any psychological or psychiatric angle to this?
Well, it's actually true, because if you ask me, if you look at people at organizational levels like CEOs, COOs,
right,
a lot of researchers talk about how in the general population, it is 1% of people who have psychopathic traits. And when it comes to people like CEOs, the population, the percentage goes from 4 to even 12%.
Oh.
Now, is that a bad thing? Not really, because if you ask me about having psychopathic traits, I'm talking about traits where an individual can take decisions without being emotional.
Right.
And at the same time, I'm talking about traits where somebody can think about something new, where there can be like we say, thinking novelty, without being afraid about will it be accepted by the society or no. So that creative aspects that come. And at the same time, when I'm talking about these CEO level people, I'm also talking about that strategic manipulation that you can do. So without being emotional, able to take decisions that can take the organization forward, are some positive traits that we talk about when it comes to people at the leadership qualities, which are very, very important.
Right.
But sometimes when this kind of a trait gradually starts turning into a disorder, or starts turning into more harm to the others, that is when, we need to be a little worried about, because this non-empathetic approach that we are talking about could cause harm to the people in the organization. So undoubtedly, yes, having these psychopathic traits can make you a greater individual, but for a long-term sustainment of the organization, you need to be a more empathetic leader than having these traits.
Right. But, talking about this, recently there was a controversial release of Epstein files, right? Almost more than 3 million pages of a report, right? Over here, we see world leaders like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and several prominent leaders' names popping up. Now, another major concern over there is pedophilia. Right. Now, is this, pedophilia as a psychological pattern or a process, it's a temporary addiction, or is it something that is deep-rooted? So
now when we talk about the psychiatric aspect of the pedophilic behavior, we are talking about repetitive sexual attraction or cravings to indulge in sexual behaviors with
younger people
and, pre-puberty age group. So it is less than 12, 13 age group. So that's exactly what the psychiatric definition is all about.
Okay, psychiatry defines it as before 12 years.
Yes.
Or pre-puberty level.
Pre-puberty level. So somewhere undoubtedly this is a major concern, because having an attraction like this not just talks about your sexual preferences, but also talks about the whole power game that your brain is seeking for, because someone at a younger age is weaker, they do not know what is exactly happening. So wanting to dominate them, push them, and at the same time force them into something like this is something that we talk as an abnormality of the brain. And most individuals who enjoy behaviors like this have had their own childhood traumas, and a lot of times these traumas can be sexual traumas which they have undergone. It could be, their own family members, relatives, or strangers sexually assaulting them at a younger age. And gradually, through repetitive such acts that they have gone through, one, their sensitivity changes. Two, that empathetic aspect in them changes into a more crude, impulsive thought process, where they believe that giving pain is only going to give me happiness. So at such points, undoubtedly, questioning the health of the brain is something that we should be looking at. And there are treatments which can help change these patterns of the brain.
Well, first of all, in the scenarios, people don't want to identify that it's a problem, right? Now here, the question is it a mental disorder, or is it a choice, or is it a blend of both?
Well, undoubtedly, as long as any sexual act is with consent, and you know that there is no harm to either of the individuals, it can be looked as a choice. But once there is lack of consent,
right,
once you know that the other person is not mentally able enough to understand what the act is,
both mentally and physically
also, and at the same time, when there is harm that could be indirectly or directly happening to the other person, this has to be treated as a psychological or a psychiatric condition. And our textbooks like the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychiatry or the ICD, International Classification of Diseases, does talk about pedophilic behaviors as a disorder.
Now, over here, when we talk about pedophilia, you just mentioned that they might have undergone a similar sexual abuse in their childhood. Now, why does this person who himself or herself has undergone such kind of situation, that same person is indulging in this kind of sexual abuse or child sexual abuse? Now, this is not just about child sexual abuse, but in general, a human being, the same trauma, the same kind of, problems that have been inflicted on them, they want to do the same kind of act which they suffered on others. What is the psychology behind this?
This is a very interesting question, and I think this also talks about the complexity of how the brain functions. Because when we talk about a healthy brain, we are talking about the brain's ability to indulge in a few behaviors, think in a particular way, express emotions in a particular way, and all of this develops when that brain gets an opportunity to grow in a safe environment. And now when that safety net is removed, that brain does not grow like any other healthy brain. So now when I say any other healthy brain, I'm talking about aspects of thinking about the others, having that empathy towards others, or understanding, what others could be feeling if I say something or if I behave in a particular way. And the other aspect that we were talking about is somewhere their brain getting accustomed or, feeling comfortable with pain to others. So this kind of a change that happens in this young brain,
is it just about accustomization, or they also find pleasure in the pain that they see in others?
No, it could be both. Not always that somebody is finding pleasure, but there are aspects and scenarios like you mentioned where their brain gets that dopaminergic hit only when they see the other person suffering. So in such scenarios, it is surely the neural wiring of the brain that has changed. It is their personalities that have changed. And gradually this change is what they is the only thing that gives them the dopamine. And now that hunt for dopamine pushes them into behaving in such particular patterns, despite knowing that this is criminal, it can be illegal, it is bad morally. Despite knowing all of that, that brain's craving continues to dominate everything else.
Okay. Now that's why, like in India, we see like 24% of the child sexual abuses are from the trusted person. Somebody within the family, as you've rightly said. Now, this Epstein files has got widespread media attention and also social media attention. But in India, there are like lakhs of cases which are reported according to NCRB data, and some are not reported also.
Right.
Now, why does this pattern, I think while we were discussing earlier also, you have mentioned that usually people from the same family or the relatives, why do they predate upon, the young chaps within the family? Now, they definitely have some emotional bonding with them. Now, what is the psychology behind this, where you want to, sexually satiate yourself through your people who are amongst your known circle or people who are related to you? Sometimes the relationship is, the kind of activities that they engage, it's a taboo kind of relationship. There also you fantasize sexually. Why does this happen?
Well, undoubtedly, this again explains how these brains, despite having the ability to create emotions, also do not have the ability to make deeper emotions. So these emotions that they carry are more superficial. So when I say more superficial, these emotions cannot be the same when their brain is unrest, where their brain is unhappy. So it can be as simple as there is only, one slice of bread to eat, and should I be eating it or should I give it to the child? So this is a very common scenario that comes where we see mentally stable people, emotionally stable people choosing it to give to the child. But when we are talking about these people who are not that deeply emotionally connected, they cannot make this simple choice too. So their brains function in a way where it is only they who needs to be prioritized, and unless they are prioritized, they cannot look at doing anything for others. And now when it comes to their sexual needs, when they are sexually deprived, they look at this as the greatest opportunity, because one, nobody is going to question them. Two, when it is a child, the resistance from the child, unfortunately, physically cannot be to a level where they won't get what their brain is craving for. So somewhere having a brain which only thinks about yourself, which does not empathize for others, which believes that I have a right because I'm also taking care of the child. We've seen this happening a lot of times where nannies, where family members who are asked to take care of the child believe that they have a right over the child because they are contributing a little in their child's
a sense of entitlement.
Yes. So somewhere these mindsets are again clearly being developed at a younger age. So not having the right kind of parenting, getting exposed to content like this, and if you look into most of these crimes, they happen during the influence of a substance. Because when you are under the influence of a substance, your brain's brake system is not functioning. So there is an ability of your brain to control its impulses. So for example, you forget your wallet here, and sometime later I just check whose wallet is this, and I realize that it is yours. But I also see some money in that. My brain could immediately tell me that, Virinchi, you wanted money, right? Why don't you just take this money and put it in your pocket? And Mr. Shashank is not going to, probably, notice it, or he's not going to, question you about this. But despite me having a thought like this, there is some part of my brain which also tells me that this is wrong, I should not be doing this. If I believe in karma, I'm going to say that, this might happen to me later. Or, I start thinking about how this money could be very important for you and why I should not be doing that. So, all of this, despite having a bad thought, is my brain's ability to stop me from doing something wrong. So this is one beautiful entity that the human brain's prefrontal cortex does. But unfortunately, this brake system of mine is shut down when the human brain is under the influence of substances.
Like
That's
alcohol,
the reason.
drugs,
Yes. Oh, yes. That's the reason if you see, if you look at any table where there are a group of people sitting and drinking alcohol, after an hour, you will realize that the tone that all of them were talking suddenly raises.
True.
Everyone's shouting.
Yeah.
That's because that brake system, which was telling you that you're in a social gathering, you can't talk loud, is shut down. This one person who never danced in his life suddenly gets up and starts dancing. That's because his brake system is not functioning. Somebody who never sang stands on the table and starts singing very loud to his girlfriend. These are harmless situations.
Right.
But now the same person who always drives his bike at a speed of 50 kilometers per hour starts driving at 100 and 150 because the brake is not working. The same person, after coming home, if he's having a little quarrel with his wife, a little argument with his wife, suddenly becomes aggressive and beats her. So all of this is happening because your impulse control area is shut down, and a lot of these sexual abuses also happen when the brain's impulse control is shut down under the influence of substances.
But that's quite understandable, Doctor, what you have said. Now, my question over here is is it just a momentary thing that is aggravated with the under substance abuse, or they have been manifesting it within their brain since a long point of time, and this was a trigger that they indulge in such kind of activity?
So the thought for the first time could have come many months back or many years back in that brain.
It's not instantaneous.
It's not instantaneously. The thought could be there, but there is a system inside your brain which is not letting this thought dominate,
Right.
which is always pressing it down or telling that it is wrong.
Yes.
But now when that teacher inside your brain is not present anymore, you cannot control these thoughts from dominating the brain. And once the thoughts dominate, it pushes the behaviors, and when there is no control over behaviors, the act happens. So it is a gradual process, a change that happens over years. And one such scenario, when the brain gets the opportunity, it comes out in the form of an act.
Doctor, talking about intoxication and substance abuse, now going by what you said, people under substance abuse, they actually lose their cognitive capability primarily, and they might indulge in some kind of deviant activities, whether it is rapes, whether it is murder, whether it is any kind of aggressive violent activities. There's a possibility of that. Now today's Gen Z believes that using cannabis and weed has a therapeutic effect. Okay, and the many people who quote that, even on social media or on general social gatherings, they say that they can function very well, they can read or they can study very well during examination situations if they have cannabis. Number one. Secondly, people under high level of stress, they say that, see, I am not addicted to it, I will have it only as a stress buster. I know my limitations. So only weekly once or monthly once when I'm in a social gathering. And also because of the socialization process, to fit into a particular group of friends who are into cannabis, I also indulge in it, but I'm not addicted to it. Now, talking about these scenarios also makes me question that I've seen this phenomena which you have quoted in your earlier podcast about cannabis-induced psychosis. So what is the understanding about this? Now, the people who support it, they also quote some famous and successful personalities or celebrities who indulge in this and they're successful. And here you are talking about cannabis-induced psychosis, which can have a long-term damaging impact on both physical, emotional, as well as psychological health.
Well, so this is the greatest difficulty that we find in our practice, because every week we at least see one adolescent child being brought by their parents.
Right.
So what usually happens is the parent starts noticing some changes in the child's behaviors, academics dropping, sleeping more, becoming a little aggressive easily, slightest of the things triggering him. And I think gradually over time they realize that they start noticing some dried leaves in this boy's pockets, finding a lighter, finding cigarettes, and then they gradually realize that there is something going wrong, and they bring him to us. So now usually the protocol is I take the consent from the family and I tell them I want to sit with the child personally and talk to him. So now this child has come so well prepared that he says everything that you said in the question. You know, they tell me that, you know, cannabis is safe, cannabis is coming from the plants, it's herbal.
Yeah, herbal is also quite
right.
It's natural.
It's natural. And there are some people who also tell me that
nature has given it.
Correct.
Lord Shiva also has done this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now the fact is that undoubtedly cannabis is a psychoactive substance. And when it enters into the brain, there is a lot of disruption that it does to the neurons. So evidence says that even a single puff of cannabis can disrupt many healthy neurons inside the brain. Now, sometimes the disruption can be temporary, sometimes it can also be permanent. So now the greatest question here is there a medicinal use of cannabis? Because there are developed countries where cannabis is used even in treatments. Now, the fact of the matter is, cannabis, when we are talking about cannabis or the plant, of cannabis, there are two different elements that come from this plant. One is the THC element, which has the psychoactive, power. So it activates the neurons, it causes a lot of dopamine release in the brain. There is also the CBD oil that comes, which does not have this high, which has medicinal use. But now, every individual consuming it for a euphoria or consuming it for a high are using the THC element, which is the toxic element. So now, when you take cannabis, your brain gets excessive dopamine. Now, your brain has never produced so much dopamine because regular activities like exercise, eating food, if they are giving you X amount of dopamine, cannabis is known to give you 3x to 4x times of dopamine. There have been some studies where on PET scans, they have seen the brain with some baseline dopamine levels, understanding how natural activities like eating your favorite food, exercising, raise the dopamine from a baseline to 70 to 75%. Activities like indulging in a sexual activity raises it up to 100%. And substances like alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, cocaine raise the bar up to 300 to 400%.
It's almost 3 times.
Yes. So now that kind of a dopamine, when your brain starts getting, your brain starts loving it. But now what's usually happening inside? There is your own dopaminergic factory. But now, since there is excessive dopamine coming from outside, your brain stops temporarily producing it. It's something like the day I'm ordering food from outside, I wouldn't be cooking in my house. But over time, this factory also is disrupted. So that means you cannot make your dopamine anymore. So you start only relying on this external dopamine. So this is why I will use it only once in a while does not work, because the chemical has a tendency to create an addictive pattern by making these changes where you start depending on this. I still remember there was this one boy who was brought into the hospital. So I still remember this one boy who was once brought into the hospital by his friends.
By his own friends?
Yes. So what exactly happened was, this guy had come down from the US and he and his friends were partying in a farmhouse and they were having drugs. And he, after consuming some X amount of cannabis, suddenly developed some behavioral changes.
Okay.
So now these friends got a little worried and they called his parents. Fortunately, his parents knew the hospital that we work in because somebody in the family has already got a treatment from us. So immediately the family said, okay, you guys are closer to the city. Please take him to this particular hospital.
Yeah.
Now, when this guy was brought in, he was extremely aggressive. So, he was tearing his own clothes. He was beating everyone. He was restrained with ropes and he was brought into the hospital.
Okay.
So now, immediately to calm him down, we had to give him an injection. And we did.
What kind of injection is that?
So this was something that will calm him down. It was like a sedative. So to calm that excess brain activity that he was having. Now, over the course of treatment, after a few days, he started becoming a little normal. The treatment was not yet complete, but the family, started becoming emotional that my son is admitted in a psychiatric hospital. What will the society think?
Yeah.
So let me bring him out from the hospital. Now the family brings him out of the hospital and the treatment was supposed to be continued, which they promised that they will take care of the treatment at home. But after going home, after a couple of days, this boy refused to take any treatment. The parents were also helpless. Now, after a few weeks, something very scary happened in my life. This boy comes to meet me and I thought probably he's come for a consultation. And he was acting very suspicious. He did not want anybody listening to what we were talking. He wanted my duty doctor to step outside. He wanted my nurse to step outside. He wanted to close all the doors. And then he comes closer to me and he whispers. He says, "Doctor, that particular day, you have given me an injection, which is black in color. And since you've given me this injection, the whole of my right side is paralyzed." Now this guy comes walking. He's already shook hands with me. But he believes that his whole one side is paralyzed.
Okay.
What he tells me is, he is very sure that his friends wanted to apparently kill him. And they have, come, to my hospital and they made some treaty with me about giving him some injection to paralyze him.
Okay.
And that is the reason I have given him this particular injection.
So he's under the hallucination that you have conspired to kill him.
Yes.
Okay.
So he's clearly having a persecutory delusion now, which says that somebody is trying to harm me. Now he tells me, "Doctor, I will spare you because you're a medical professional, but you need to tell me what is this injection, because I'm going to buy this injection and start giving it to all my friends right now because I want them to be paralyzed." Now I tried explaining him. That you are absolutely fine. You are sitting with me. Your right side is not paralyzed, but he does not believe. So this typical pattern of not believing what reality is, but living in that own belief system that his brain is producing, is a typical psychotic element which happened to him because of the cannabis that he used. Now, what really happened after that got me worried to a level where there was a time where I was considering not to continue this profession.
Oh my God. It went so bad.
Yes. And after a few weeks, what happened was, he started coming regularly to the hospital and he would wait at the main gate. Every time I'm stepping out, he would start walking with me, talking to me, pleading me. So his typical behavior was this. He would say, "Please sir, please sir, please sir, tell me sir, please sir, please sir, please sir." Suddenly he would get aggressive and he was like, "Will you tell me or shall I kill you?"
my God.
And this was the typical pattern that continued till I had to actually take police help, involve his family, where the police had to shift him to another psychiatric establishment where he underwent treatment. And I do not know if the treatment continued till whenever it was necessary. But later I got to know from the family that through the treatments, through the course of time, that psychotic episode gradually reduced. So what really happened there? A brain that was doing better, under the influence of the substance, got into a psychotic state. And in that psychotic state, this brain started going into a delusion, believing that everybody around him was harming him, including his friends, including his family, including the doctor. And he believed that his right side was paralyzed despite being absolutely fine, walking into my cabin and sitting and talking to me. So this is the kind of disruption a substance like cannabis can be doing to the brain. And a lot of these beliefs that youngsters have, that, it is coming from the plant, so I can be using it, or it is having some cognitive abilities, are actually not the reasons why they should be consuming it, because there could be some temporary positive change that we see. But in the long run, it is causing great disruption.
So it was quite an enriching and enlightening conversation, Dr. Virinchi Sharma. And I'm sure the insights that you've shared and the kind of articulation and varied experiences with patients that you've shared with our audience is definitely going to give them a clear sense of direction and also resolve a lot of mental dilemmas and traumas that they face on a day-to-day scale. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And I thoroughly enjoyed, every aspect that we discussed today. And it's always great seeing you. Thank you.
That's your humility. Thank you.